So we had an interview earlier with Brian Carney from SDI TDI, and his advice for new divers was learn to be a better photographer while diving. Now, what tips would you give us as a fantastic photographer yourself to get there?
Learn to be a fantastic diver before shooting photos. As a technical diver, you can appreciate we don't start off, in cave. We start off in intro to cave. And before you start off there, you've already mastered how to use the equipment that you're going to be using in that intro to cave class. So become a good photographer. The task loading, once you add even a GoPro, distracts people far more than they realize, and they become focused in this narrow field of vision instead of having adaptive perception of the world around them. Like I lead a shark dive in Tiger Beach. I just got back from there, and you need to focus on the sharks. Certainly, we understand, and it's a safe encounter, but that doesn't mean you can just ignore the sharks around you and not manage them to some degree. So you need to make eye contact with the shark. If you're looking exclusively at your device, you're going to miss subjects that you want to photograph, miss perhaps dive needs. So your safety should always come first when you have a camera in hand. Be ready to stow or ditch your equipment. If you can't afford to lose or break a piece of equipment, don't dive with that equipment. Take something, because you are not disposable. And no matter how expensive your set is, that has to be disposable given a situation that may arise. And if you're a good diver, you're going to have fewer situations because you're going to be doing checklists and setting up properly and preparing properly for your dives so that you can focus on the world around you.
That's a good point. And I like that quite a bit. I mean, you're not the disposal portion at all. Now that you brought up something interesting that, and Dan Orr talks about a lot about this, is the checklist. Talk to us a little bit about your checklist on this process.
I have many checklists. So if I'm technical diving, I have a checklist for equipment setup for that. I also have a checklist for how I'm going to plan the dive. If it's a cold water dive, I have a cold water checklist. So each different kind of diving I have, there's a checklist, and there's also a camera setup checklist, depending on what kind of shoot. Am I shooting wide angle or macro? And the tools I need differ per the different kinds of diving that I have and the plan dive. The plan changes. So if I'm
Mhm.
carrying two cameras, that's more complex than if I'm carrying one, for instance. So I need to also coordinate with my buddies. And this is where I think it's harder to find buddies, it feels sometimes. Um, like we've become too self-reliant, and I like working in team mindsets where I have somebody who can carry a camera and then I can turn their air on, or asking for help is absolutely part of the sport. And we are there to be a community of helpful divers to one another. It's not a negative that you can't do everything for yourself. Certainly you can do everything for yourself in life, but I think the people who get further are the people who work together collaboratively.
Well, you know what they say: if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go as a team. And you know my story is to get a quality dive buddy on a regular basis, I had to marry one. So that was my secret to getting the right dive buddy, and I drug her through tech with me as well. So I get it completely. It's tricky, that's for sure. Now you've got a neat project you're working on, and you are officially the marketing director of Dive Avelo. I think
Yes.
you tell us about Dive Avelo.
Avelo is a new invention. So, the Avelo system is a lightweight scuba system that weighs nearly half the weight of a standard scuba system, and it
Wow.
uses water to manage the buoyancy within a tank called a hydro tank. This is a carbon fiber composite tank that is super lightweight, and by putting water in the tank, it acts a bit like a submarine. So, controlling your buoyancy using the tank itself means it's within a rigid surface, and you don't adjust your buoyancy for depth. So it's more like free diving. You adjust your buoyancy at the surface and then you just dive. If you're at 30 feet, 60 feet, or 100 feet, you don't adjust your buoyancy because of the depth. The only time you need to adjust your buoyancy is when you consume the gas out of the tank and it becomes a bit light, just as with every scuba tank out there. Then you add more water to the system. And it's a manual system, so you're completely in control of when you add the water or release the water. So this system is changing the way people dive because the standard scuba system, be that in technical or recreational diving, uses an inflatable wing or BCD to control your buoyancy. And every few feet, your zone of buoyancy changes. So you have to either add or release air from that BCD to compensate for depth. This changing depth can lead to runaway ascents or descents in particular, and that's fairly hazardous if you're ascending too fast or descending too quickly underwater. So
Wow.
this system eliminates that issue.
That is amazing. Absolutely amazing. So you've obviously dove with a dry suit. Tell us about the buoyancy characteristics diving a dry suit.
The buoyancy characteristics for the tank work the same, and your buoyancy characteristics with your dry suit work the same. So you still need to manage your buoyancy in your dry suit and release and let go of the air as normally. But I dropped 30 pounds of weight in diving my dry suit with the total weight that I would have used in a standard scuba system.
Wow. So you dropped 30 pounds of lead from a dry suit.
It's not of lead, of total weight when you
Of total weight.
compare,
Okay, fair enough.
yeah, the system to the system.
System to system, but still dropping 30 pounds out of a dry suit. I mean, we all know driving a dry suit is a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of extra weight, and you're starting to do these shore entries, whether it be a lake or the ocean or whatnot. 30 pounds is a lot of extra weight to carry. That's amazing.
Yes. Yes. It
So tell,
also, because you're carrying less weight and the system is streamlined, you don't have the big wing or BCD on your back.
Mhm.
You're more efficient in your breathing, and the neutral buoyancy contributes to that as well. So you have longer dive times and you have less exertion. So being exerted underwater, as you know, can lead to a number of issues, the worst of which being panic with CO2 buildup.
Absolutely. So, how did you prepare to become the marketing director for Dive Avelo?
I got involved through graphic design. I designed their logo, their website, and then I did their photography, their videos, the animation, pretty much every visual you see out there. And then I also crafted the content guideline for how we communicate about the product. And we work together as a team. The CEO is an engineer and the inventor of the system. And everybody that works on the team is an experienced uh, diver. So we all come from the dive industry. So the CEO, myself, many of us, we're all also have a dive instructor background. So we
Mhm.
understand a lot of the different sides of how to manage something like this.
That's fantastic. And I think that's always a key is you need to understand. I never understand when I see somebody in the dive industry that is not a diver. I'm like, I just can't understand how that works or why that would work. So it definitely has to be an advantage to have everybody in the company be a passionate diver, have an instructor background, and have a love for the ocean and a love of diving to make this really take off and go where it needs to go.
And also to understand our people. It's our tribe.
I love that. I think I'm going to steal that. In fact, I'm writing it down. The Dive Tribe. I like it. I hadn't thought about it in that direction, but that's really what it is. Is we are absolutely a tribe of our own. That is for sure. So Jennifer, as an expert in underwater photography and video, after we finally get that buoyancy characteristic down, where we can manage ourselves, manage our gear, manage our buoyancy and our trim, we're comfortable in the water, and we're starting to take those first images. Can you give us any tips on capturing stunning images and footages in this unique environment once we've got those things down?
When you think you're close enough to your subject, get closer. So keep in mind where you are in relation to your subject. And I shoot a lot of wide angle, but the same is true for macro. Is just getting close to your subject so you can reduce the water between you and your subject. That creates clearer images. And think about what tools you need to do that. And light appropriately. So additional sourced lighting I find is almost always better than ambient lighting. Certainly ambient lighting is something I use on the whale sharks or the whale expeditions because they're too much drag. But by and large, I bring lighting when I'm shooting scuba diving underwater photography. It's slower and I also try to be compositional forward. So when I started shooting, I shot everything. And one of my instructors came to me and he goes, "What are you shooting pictures of?" Because I was just so in love with everything that I saw. So pick a subject and figure out what that subject is. If you're planning a dive and you want to shoot sea turtles and no sea turtles show up, this is an Alex Mustard recommendation, who's another photographer. Uh, but go with the willing subject. So if there's no sea turtles, but you have an amazing wreck in front of you, or an eel, or something else, go with the subject that is cooperating or that you are able to capture, and you'll have a better time and a better experience capturing images that are meaningful to you. And think about why you're shooting. Where are you going to use them? Like I shot a photo of a seahorse underwater. Don't berate other divers if you think they're not doing something correctly. Be informative. But I was shooting the seahorse with a wide angle. It was obviously inappropriate. And I had another diver who got in my face and was like, "Why did you shoot a photo of that? You can't use it." I was like, "Well, sometimes I'm a tourist and I like to see the seahorses too."
I think everybody likes to see the. That's I think one of the most sought after photos anyway. Is the let's get the seahorse. Let's get the seahorse.
But
My
it
wife.
wasn't gonna be like a pro shot that I was gonna use. It was a memory shot, so I could remember that on that dive I saw a seahorse.
I don't blame you a bit. Anytime I see a seahorse or anything like that, I guarantee whether I've got the right gear or don't have the right gear, I try and get the photo of it. There's been a few others where I've seen a shark from a distance that I was very excited about. See the tiger come in, but he's curious, but he's at a distance. I just want the memory. This is not going in a book. I'm not publishing, not a website. I just want the memory of the cool thing that I saw.
Yes, and
I get that. I get that
that's
completely.
worthwhile. I
But
also try not to harass subjects. I'll take a few photos of a subject. If you see a subject getting stressed, move on. If you're in a group of divers, keep in mind that if you're shooting 2 or 3 shots and you're in a group of 6 or 8 divers, 2 or 3 shots times 6 or 8 is a lot of shots for one animal. So
sure.
think about how often you're shooting strobes or getting in an animal's face. Because if you got in my face like that personally, you might, have an unpleasant reaction.
I think that's a great thing we don't take into account the stress that we're putting on the marine life sometimes by spending that time. We want to go over, we want to spend the time, and we feel like it's almost like we've gone to grandma's house and grandma wants to see us that whole time, but it's not like that. They are a wild animal. They live in their thing and we're in their space. They can only take so much of it. So that's a very, very good point, is be cognizant of the stress you're placing on the marine life. Get your photo if you need to, but good point. I take notes throughout all these interviews, and that's one of the ones I'm taking note to add to my personal repertoire. So you've got a lot going on. You are probably you probably have more miles on your vehicle as a dive photographer than anybody I know. How do you balance the creative aspects of your work as a photographer, author, marketing director, designer, wife, homeowner? I mean, you've got a lot of irons in the fire.
I try to have periodic planning sessions and evaluate, am I meeting my goals or what I'm wanting to achieve in this year with what I'm doing. And the 50 state tour in some ways was fantastic because the goal was set before me. I knew what I was doing. This is how it is. And that's it. I just followed that path. But after the book was published, it's like graduating university. There's a big cliff. You don't know where you're going, and all of a sudden you're doing everything, and you have to figure out. Uh, to quote Jada Selner from her company, you have to make sticky spaghetti, throw it at the wall until something sticks, and figure out where your passions are and how to roll that story. Uh, like I want to go back to Yellowstone with you very badly, but it just hasn't fit yet with the load that I have had. So this year, Alex and I are going to California to do a 2 week shoot on the leopard sharks to do an intense look as part of our Protected Waters series to offer maybe a longer episodic uh, series piece about the leopard sharks and as it relates scientifically to the whole marine protected area out there in La Jolla altogether. And that's giving a pointed story had a lot of compelling reasons for me to make something that wasn't just either Avelo or Big Fish Expeditions, but was part of the storytelling I wanted to do as well. So it's a balance. You do a little bit every day on different things. You have a schedule. I have a digital calendar like we all do, but you have the move it forward that happens with your calendar. Uh, there's the business side too. I have to do my taxes. I have to do my QuickBooks accounting. I'm my own bookkeeper. I don't make enough that I can afford to train a bookkeeper to understand the unusual world of underwater photography and design. So it takes time, and then every week you have to chip away at little things. Social media can be a huge time waster, and now I'm posting really weekly and finding that has as much or more impact than just staying relevant until I have something that is more pressing to share, because I'm working so much on these other projects. It takes time to develop projects, and I think in the social media world, there's an expectation that people have an immediate turnaround. I've had guests where I've shot video on the boat and we're leaving the boat and they want to know where their video is. And I'm like, well, it takes a minute to edit, so give me a couple of weeks. But just planning for the time it takes and trying to be realistic about what you can accomplish.